My name is Tiffany Q, and welcome to my ABRSM Grade 5 Theory Lessons series, where I record snippets of my live lessons with my students. Please note that this is not a substitute for a textbook. If you're preparing for the theory exam, I would still recommend having a teacher to guide you through both the coursework and exam paper preparation. Compound intervals. Any interval larger than an octave is known as a compound interval. We can imagine the top note one octave down and identify it as any other interval. However, compound intervals can have two names, and that's the only tricky thing. Other than that, it's just one extra step, but shouldn't be too different from what we've been doing before. If we take a look at this interval here, we see that it's greater than an octave. Well, this is an F and that's a G. If I had F an octave higher, which is this F, that G is still higher than the F, so we can tell this is a compound interval. So what we need to do is we need to bring the two notes closer together. I've said here, we can imagine the top note one octave down, but you can actually imagine the bottom note one octave up as well, as long as the F is still below the G. Okay, so we don't want to swap it around like this. Okay, that would be an interval inversion. We want either what you see here, the F and the G, or this one, because it's the same interval. Then we identify what this interval is. It's clearly a major second, because in F major, the second note is a G natural, so that's a major second. This interval can be called a compound major second or a major ninth. We always add the number 7 when we are adding on an octave in music. We always add 7. People get confused because they think that you add on 8 to make it an octave higher, but not actually, because, well, it's quite complicated, but if you look at your instrument, you will actually figure it out. You can count it. If we were to add 8 and make that a 10th, we're actually counting the octave note, so let's say F to F. We're counting that F twice if we do that. So that's why we add 7. Okay. You can name the interval just as we have always done. So the type of interval followed by the number, or just stick in the word compound and then you can just include the sort of the basic form of the interval, which is a major second. Okay, the compound means it's bigger than an octave. So that's how we would remember the difference between the two names. Identify the compound intervals giving both their names. This is a great example of the role of key signatures. So the key signatures here will only affect the pitches of these notes. So this is B flat, E flat, and A flat, which tells me that this note is an A flat. Other than that, I can pretty much ignore this here and work out my interval as usual. F to A flat. Well, let me bring that A flat down by an octave. I can see it's a third, okay. In F major, the third note is A natural, but this is an A flat, so it's been lowered by one semitone. So that there would be a minor third. But remember, it's a compound interval, so that's a compound minor third, or a minor, and I add 7. So that would be 3 plus 7, which is 10. So that's a minor 10th. So there's two names, compound minor third or minor 10th. Next one here, we have F sharp and C sharp. So that there is our F sharp. Great, just to make sure to note that, because the accidentals really make a difference to your intervals. So we've got a G to F sharp. It's really high, so let me bring that down by an octave. G sharp here. Well, in G major, the 7th note is F sharp, because in G major there is one sharp, F sharp, and it happens just to be the 7th note. So that there is a major 7th. So because it's bigger than an octave, it would be a compound major 7th, or a major, so we add 7 to this, would be a 14th, major 14th. And then the last one here, interestingly enough, the key signature or the accentals here don't actually affect the interval itself. This is still an A natural. F, C, G, D. So this is still an A natural. So A natural to E flat. Let's bring that down an octave. In A major, the fifth would be a perfect fifth, and that would be an E natural. This is an E flat, so that there is a diminished fifth. Okay? No such thing as minor fifths. So you might need to refer back to your interval equation for that. So that there is a diminished fifth. Oops. But because that is bigger than an octave, that's a compound diminished fifth, or a diminished, we add 7, diminished 12th. So those are your two names. Interval inversions. This is not taught on the course, but it's a very useful skill to have. So I always go through this with my students. You might find that when you're looking at an interval in the exam or you're working out a question, this might be the fastest way to work it out. So I'll explain the properties of an inversion of an interval, and then I will show you a few ways where it might be quite helpful for you, either in the exam or just in your general musical life. For any interval that is less than an octave, and you can theoretically use it sort of big for a compound interval as well, we can use a trick to check that we have identified an interval correctly. So these are some rules. When we turn any interval upside down, or we invert it, the two intervals, the numbers will add up to 9. The two intervals will add up to 9. And if it's a major, then it'll become a minor. If it's a minor, it'll become a major. If it's augmented, it'll become diminished, and if it was diminished, then it'll become augmented. And perfect just stays perfect, because it's, I guess, so perfect. Okay. This one here, that is a major sixth. G to E, because the sixth note of G major is an E natural. Okay, great, major sixth. Now we flip that around, so instead of the G being the lower note, we make that the higher note. That becomes a minor third. Major and minor are opposites, and 6 plus 3 equal 9. Let's double check that this is a minor third. Well, the bottom note is E, so we think of our E major. E major has 4 sharps. Father Charles goes down, so the G is meant to be a sharp. This is a G natural, so it's been lowered by a semitone. So the major third lowered by a semitone becomes a minor third. So that works. This one here, C to F sharp, is an augmented fourth. So we flip that around, it becomes a diminished fifth. This here, A to D, is a perfect fourth. We flip it around, it becomes a perfect fifth. So 4 plus 5 equals 9. 4 plus 5 equals 9. Augmented, diminished are opposites, and perfect, well, it just stays perfect, really, when you invert it. Why is that handy? It's handy for 2 reasons. Number 1, you might get an interval like this in the exam. Now, you could work that out perfectly fine from F sharp major. F sharp major, the fifth note of F sharp major is C sharp. This is a C natural, it's been lowered by a semitone. Perfect fifth, lowered by a semitone, becomes diminished fifth. That's fine. But, you know, you could actually flip it around like this, and this, we can all agree, is a much easier interval to work out, because C is the bottom note. C major is very simple. So the fourth note is F natural, raise it by a semitone, becomes augmented fourth. So if you knew that this was an augmented fourth, you could easily figure out that this would be a diminished fifth if we flip it around. So it can be used when you have quite a difficult interval, and if you see that the top note is actually quite easy, if you flip it around, you could find the inversion, and as a result, you could find out what the interval from the question is. Name the following intervals and their inversions. So I'm going to show you here. G to B flat. Well, G major has only 1 sharp in it. That's an F sharp. So the third note of G major, which would be a major third, is a B natural. This here is a B flat. So it's a major interval lowered by 1 semitone, which is a minor third. The opposite of minor is major, and 3 plus 6 equals 9. So without even studying anything else, I know that this is a major sixth. Next one here, A to B. Well, A major has three sharps, F, C, G, so the B would indeed be a natural, so it's just a nice major second. The opposite of major is minor, and 2 plus 7 equals 9. Take a look at this here. Imagine we got this in the exam. Sure, you could raise both notes by a semitone and transpose it. That becomes a B flat, and that becomes a G sharp, and you can work it out that way. But another way you could do it now is you could flip it around, find what this is, and then automatically know what that one is. So let's do that. G to B double flat. Well, just being lazy here, we know that this here is a minor third, right? So we lowered that a minor by one semitone, becomes a diminished third. If this is a diminished third, this must automatically be an augmented sixth. Opposite of diminished is augmented, and then 3 plus 6 equals 9. Now, the other way that this could be very handy, which is what we're moving on to now, but I want to stay on this for an example first. Let's say they asked you, well, they won't ask you this in the exam, but let's say in life, you have the B flat. Now, do you remember when we were doing transposition? That is question 2.3 on your pitch section in the exam, where they will sometimes ask you for an interval below. Remember? So they would ask you to transpose the music like a major second lower, a minor third lower, or perfect fifth lower. And before, what we were doing was we were counting all the semitones, which is fine if we only have like a couple of intervals. But if we have so many intervals like this, it's a bit harder to actually, calculate that. So for that question, you can either count the semitones, double check that it is the interval, and then move on, or you could use this method now. Let's say they wanted a minor third below this B flat, okay? So we can clearly see that a minor third below is a G. But let's say we didn't know. What you can do is you can find out what a major sixth is above. So a minor third below is the opposite of a major sixth above. So if I found out what a major sixth above was, which is the G here, then I just move that down an octave, and I know that that is a minor third below. So let's put this into an example, into context. Major third below this F sharp. Well, I know a third is going to be this note here. A third must be on this space. And then, you could play around and then until you find, and I can see this D to F sharp is a major third. But if we take a major third below, the opposite of a major third below is a minor sixth above. Okay? Minor sixth above F sharp, well, a major sixth above F sharp is a D sharp, and then lower that by a semitone to make a minor is a D. So then I can lower that by an octave, and that gives us the major third below. This one, augmented third below. Well, an augmented third below is the opposite of a diminished sixth above. So that's a C. A diminished sixth above would be an A double flat. So if I wanted an augmented third below, it'd also be an A double flat. So I would just write that there. And this is an interesting one. A minor tenth below. So I mentioned that you only could use it for intervals that are not compound intervals, but you can find a loophole here. Minor tenth is the same thing as a compound minor, well, take away 7, so it's a third. Okay, compound minor third below. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. Okay, let's take this one. Minor third below is the same thing as a major sixth above. So what's a major sixth above a B? Well, a major sixth above a B is a sixth note of B major, which is a G sharp. So the pitch that we're looking for is a G sharp. Okay, but because that there is just, it's not a compound, we can lower that by a whole octave to make it a compound, but at least we have the pitch. So that there would be a minor tenth below. Don't worry if this is getting a little bit tricky. You won't get an interval question like this, and they will never ask you for an interval below the note, but the most important thing is to understand how the inversions work and then be able to apply that to some of the questions, in case that is the easiest method for you to figure out an interval in the exam.